everyone, and welcome to the latest Tempo Strategy Wild Meta Snapshot breakdown for Darkmoon races. We're coming up on some exciting times for Wild with the new expansion, new core set, and dozens of nerf revisions all just right around the corner. In the meantime, we've seen the Darkmoon races meta ebb and flow after the post-nerf surge of aggro decks and corresponding surge of anti-aggro decks to counter them. After the dust settled, the 4 best decks to beat are mostly set in stone, but there are still plenty of alternate strategies in Tier 2 and below that are still capable of giving the Tier 1 decks a run for their money. So which decks are your best bet for climbing as the Darkmoon meta comes to a close? Come join our Wild meta experts as we break down the format's latest developments. Let's start with the format's top deck, Dark Glare Warlock. Even though Darkmoon races introduced Armor Vendor and Hysteria as soft counters for the deck, top Legend Dark Glare experts have gone back to the drawing board to adjust the deck to overcome a weaker matchup spread. The end result is the universal edition of 2 copies of Backfire along with the popular edition of Zephrys the Great. The added draw power helps the deck hit its giant swarm win condition more consistently than before, and Zephrys gives the deck yet another powerful win condition against decks that try to win by exhausting Dark Glare of resources. Even with this tech change, the deck's ideal game plan is still the same: play self-damaging cards early to discount your giants and make a big push, then lock the opponent out by playing Animated Broomstick to swing control of the board, or play Loatheb to deny removal. Dark Glare Warlock remains the top Legend grinder's weapon of choice, and while it's one of the most difficult decks to play in Wild, it's one of the most powerful decks in the hands of an expert. Next up we have Odd Rogue, which has emerged as the most consistent aggro deck in the format at Legend ranks. The upgraded hero power from Baku the Moon Eater gives the deck constant access to a powerful weapon that can hold buffs and deal fast damage to the opponent's face or destroy the opponent's minions as necessary. Between the hero power and the deck's assortment of 1-drop minions and fast card draw, the deck is able to threaten lethal damage very quickly before many decks can stabilize. Odd Rogue does have a weakness against decks with wide boards in the early turns, but it can still work around this weakness by making face damage a priority and simply winning the race. Put it all together, and Odd Rogue's fast damage potential and overall flexibility make it an all-star pick for climbing to Legend in the late Darkmoon meta. Next up, Reno Priest holds its spot in Tier 1 as the format's most powerful Highlander deck. As a control combo hybrid deck, it can win matchups against aggro with heavy removal, healing, and the Highlander suite, and against slower decks, it has inevitability with the Raza Anduin combo. Recently, Reno Priest has had to adjust to the rising popularity of Dark Glare Warlock and Odd Rogue, so Glacial Shard and Wave of Apathy have become common inclusions in top Legend lists. Reno Priest is relatively weak against rogues, but it tends to be very strong against the rest of the meta. Despite its strengths, Reno Priest has recently lost a lot of its former popularity, so it's less likely to be teched against, but still be aware of tech counters like the Grizzled Wizard and Sir Finley combo that are common inclusions in some slower decks like Reno Warlock. Secret Mage is the final deck in our Tier 1 spread, and it remains one of the most popular decks in the game, even if its overall strength is reduced in the late Darkmoon races meta. Fact of the matter is, most of the top decks have adjusted in the past few months and are now well equipped to challenge Secret Mage in the early game before it can get a solid foothold. Even so, Secret Mage still has a powerful combination of solid board development, disruptive secrets, fast card draw, and over-the-top burn damage that can be frustrating to play against, especially for players that are trying to climb with lower tier decks. Overall, Secret Mage is still the ultimate gatekeeper deck, so you'll want to keep it on your radar. Moving on to Tier 2, we've seen some recent developments that have resulted in there being more decks at this tier, so we'll highlight a few of the most relevant strategies. The most significant recent change is the format's adjustment to Kingsbane Rogue, which has fallen to Tier 2 in our snapshot. Kingsbane Rogue continues to be one of the fastest aggro decks in the game, and it can certainly build a lethal Kingsbane quickly with its critical mass of buffs, but it is more vulnerable to tech cards like Glacial Shard that have become common inclusions in top tier decks. Since it trades resiliency for raw damage output, it's more of a glass cannon than Odd Rogue, so it's fallen a bit out of favor. Still, Kingsbane Rogue is a strong option for climbing, and it can be a very scary deck to run into if you're not prepared to deal with a big weapon. Big Priest also maintains its spot in Tier 2, and with the exception of Dark Glare Warlock, no other top deck can summon an army of massive minions quite as quickly. With the Palm Reading into Shadow Essence combo, Big Priest can start summoning 9 and 10 drops as early as turn 5, and once it starts summoning these monsters, it can easily stonewall aggro decks and steamroll control decks. Big Priest's game plan is pretty straightforward, but it has some glaring weaknesses that keep it out of the top tiers. Not only does it have a passive early game that's dependent on removal for survival, but it's also a sitting duck against combo decks in general. Even so, Big Priest remains powerful and simple to play, and it eclipses Reno Priest in popularity, so it's definitely a matchup you want to have a plan for. Odd Paladin is our next Tier 2 pick, and with its fast and consistent board development with the upgraded hero power and AoE buffs, it continues to be a solid choice for ladder. Odd Paladin is heavily dependent on the board, so while it tends to do well against other aggro decks, decks with weaker board development, like Odd Rogue, it can struggle against decks that are heavy on removal, like Reno Priest and Big Priest. Darkglare Warlock can be a problematic matchup, but our featured list includes an out with the Lord Barov and Animated Broomstick combo, which makes short work of Darkglare's army of giants. Next up in Tier 2, we have Reno Warlock, which stands as the strongest pure control deck in Wild. Reno Lock makes use of Warlock's abundant removal and the Highlander suite to keep the game under control, and it has a few options for its win condition as well. Our featured list uses the combo of Ticketus and Bran Bronzebeard or Zola the Gorgon to delete the opponent's deck, but the alternate approach of summoning big demons with Archwitch Willow and N'Zoth the Corruptor is also still popular. Either way, Reno Lock is one of the most flexible decks in the game, and it can easily accommodate a wide variety of tech choices to tackle the expected meta. The last deck of our snapshot takes some inspiration from its popular standard counterpart, but thanks to some powerful cards exclusive to Wild, it's starting to make a name for itself at the top legend ladder. It's none other than Token Druid, which quickly turns a flurry of spells into an army of tokens, then turns that army of tokens into a massive alpha strike. Key additions to the Wild version of the deck include Living Roots and Mark of the Lotus, which both work well with Gibberling to build a massive board extremely quickly in the early turns. The combo of Solar Eclipse and Savage Roar is the deck's main knockout blow, but with Branching Paths and Arbor Up, you have virtually 6 copies of Savage Roar for a ridiculous level of redundancy. This style of deck may seem weak against AoE removal, but with Whispering Woods and so many other ways to flood the board, the deck can rebuild over and over again to set up the killing blow. The end result is a deck that can hold its own at the highest ranks, and since slower Druid decks like Jade and Malagos are more popular, you can catch players off guard if they mulligan for other decks. Altogether, Token Druid is a solid dark horse pick for climbing ladder as the Darkmoon Races meta comes to a close. Overall, the Wild meta has fully adjusted to the changes from Darkmoon Races and its subsequent nerfs, and we don't expect much more to change until the launch of Forged in the Barrens later this month. We're looking forward to seeing the impact from the upcoming nerf revisions and the new core set, but in the meantime, be sure to check out the full report on our website for all the details on the current Wild meta. Thanks for watching!